Hi, it's Len Edgerly. I am in Las Vegas on June 7th, 2019, and this episode of the Kindle Chronicles is pretty much about the future. The reason I have been in Las Vegas this week is that I have been attending REMARS, an Amazon conference that used to be a private invitation-only event that Jeff Bezos would invite scientists and other people in the various categories of the name. MARS stands for Machine Learning, Automation, Robots, and Space. This is the first year they opened it up to the public, and I had a chance to cover it as a member of the press for the Kindle Chronicles. I had 50 pages of notes on my Remarkable and hours of recording, so I spent the morning here missing the last session so that I could try to organize my thoughts about what I've learned and how I've been inspired to pass along to you for today's episode. Then I'll be flying back to Denver later tonight. To set the stage a little, I estimate that maybe 3,000 to 5,000 people attended. You could tell that from how many people were in the big ballroom for the keynote addresses. Security was pretty high. There were lots of folks that were talking into sort of Secret Service style ear plugs, and also quite a number of dogs around sniffing the area. You may have read that there was a disruption during Jeff's presentation yesterday. A woman came, I think, from the back of the stage, and she had credentials. So she had a lanyard and a pass of some kind, but she had a statement that she made briefly. In less than a minute, she was pretty calmly escorted off the stage, and Jeff resumed his talk as if nothing had happened. Jeff Bezos wasn't as big a presence at this version of Mars as apparently he was in previous ones, based on press coverage that I saw where he was walking a robot dog and playing kind of a host role. At this event, the person who was introducing us, there were two, Dave Limp, head of Amazon Devices and Services, and Jeff Wilkie, who seems to be kind of head of everything else, and I'll have some thoughts on that in a moment. Jeff appeared yesterday, which is Thursday, for about a half-hour, 40-minute fireside chat, as it was called, and this was, he was sitting in a comfortable chair with Jenny Freshwater, who is an Amazon executive who is in the work of predicting demand for products. She asked very concise questions. I recorded it myself. I was in the front row, naturally, but my recording is a little bit marred by my own reactions to things, and this is a highlights, 5 minutes of highlights from Jeff's conversation with Jenny that talks about what he might have done if he hadn't ended up at Amazon, the moon, starting a business, and other things which will give you a feeling for the talk.
Jeff, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
I'm happy to be here.
I think we can all agree this Amazon thing, it seems to be working for you. But if it weren't, what would you be doing?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad it is working. That is good. I love my job. I tap dance into the office. If Amazon had worked out, I'd probably be an extremely happy software engineer.
Do you ever have trouble winning support for any of your ideas?
The answer is yes. You know, if I have a new idea that I am in love with and I want to see it pursued, I do have to build support for it, just like anybody would, because you need very smart people to embrace the idea and move it forward. We have a framework at Amazon. It's one of our leadership principles. It's called disagree and commit. And that is extremely useful. Because after you've discussed an idea, you do need to make a decision and move forward, and the whole team needs to really commit to that. When I really feel strongly about something and the team disagrees with me, I have a phrase that I like to use, which is helpful, which is, I want you to gamble with me on this. It's very different from phrasing that in a different way, because the truth is, when you're in a position like that where nobody knows what the right answer is, you're not saying, I'm right on this, go do this. You're saying, I want you to gamble with me on this, because I don't know if it's right either. I disagree and commit all the time. And I promise the people when I do it, very clear, I don't agree with this. I think it's probably not going to work, but I will never say I told you so, and I'm going to be on your team. I will do everything I can to make it work.
What's a big bet that we've taken recently at Amazon?
The recent one is, it would be Project Kuiper. This is our LEO satellite constellation. This is the goal here is broadband everywhere. One of the things it does is just the way the systems work, you have equal broadband all over the surface of the Earth. Not exactly equal. It tends to be a little bit more concentrated toward the poles, unfortunately. But you end up servicing the whole world, and so it's really good. By definition, you end up accessing people who are kind of under bandwidth, rural areas, remote areas. And I think you can see going forward that access to broadband is going to be very close to being a fundamental human need as we move forward.
Think we'll ever have Amazon fulfillment centers on the moon?
That's a very good question. I haven't really contemplated that. We'll have to. I think we'll start out delivering, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. It's going to be a small selection.
Fair enough.
But a very important one.
Right. What advice would you give anyone in the room who's looking to start their own business?
I get asked this question from time to time, and there are a few pieces of it. If you want to be an entrepreneur, the most important thing is to be customer obsessed. So don't satisfy your customers. Figure out how to absolutely delight them. That is the number one thing, whoever your customers are. Passion, you have got to have some passion for the arena that you're going to develop and work in. Because otherwise you're going to be competing against people who do have passion for that, and they're going to build better products and services. You can't be a mercenary, you have to be a missionary. Missionaries build better products and services, they always win. The mercenaries are just trying to make money, and paradoxically, the missionaries always end up making more money. You have to pick something that you actually have a genuine passion for. You have to take risk. You have to be willing to take risk. If you aren't going to take risk, if you come up with a business idea, there's no risk there, you're probably, it's probably already being done. Those ideas are already being done. They're being done well by many, many people. So you've got to have something that might not work. And so you have to accept that your business is going to be, in many ways, an experiment, and it might fail. And that's okay. That's what risk is. The good news is, in Amazon, we still take risks all the time, and we encourage it, and we talk about failure. We should be failing. Our failures have to grow with the company. We need big failures if we're going to be moving the needle. We need to have, billion-dollar scale failures, and if we're not swinging hard enough.
The day before Jeff Bezos addressed the entire group, we heard from Jeff Wilke, who is the head of worldwide operations at Amazon. He's listed as CEO for worldwide activities. And I remember that when we spoke with John Rossman last week, he had said that he thought Jeff Wilke might be someone who is being groomed to be the successor for Jeff if Bezos ever decides to move on to full-time emphasis on his Blue Origin space project and other activities. As I was thinking about Jeff Wilke and wondering, well, is this really the next Jeff Bezos? I did some looking up, and I found out that Bill Gates had retired from active running of Microsoft, really turning over Microsoft to Ballmer when Gates was 58 years old. Jeff is now 55 years old. So if he were to follow his fellow Seattle executive, and I think they're pretty close, sometime in the next 3 years, we might be seeing that kind of succession happen. The setup for Wilke struck me as almost introducing himself, and clearly this had been the agenda for this event must have been figured out by Jeff and everybody at Amazon. When he took the stage for the keynote, it was as if he was introducing himself as somebody who has a long history with Amazon and who is currently in charge of it sounds like, most of the employees in the company. The particularly poignant part of this sort of a imagery of perhaps passing the baton were two photos, and you'll hear him talking about them, one of Jeff Wilke and one of Jeff Bezos at apparently a similar age, I guess maybe 9 years old, something like that, each of them at a computer. And the sense that these two were very similar types, and Jeff Wilke came to Amazon 5 years after it was founded in 1994, and has been involved in it ever since in a very intimate level. So anyway, lots of speculation about if Jeff is going to stay as the head of Amazon for a long time, and if he is going to move on to other activities, who might take his place. And we might have seen a little bit of information about that here at Remars. Here's how Jeff Wilke introduced himself during his keynote.
Let me take a minute to introduce myself. I'm one of the other Jeffs at Amazon. More officially, I'm CEO of the worldwide consumer business. This includes Prime, robotics, fulfillment, Amazon Business, Amazon Go, Whole Foods, Prime Air, and of course, Amazon.com, Amazon Germany, Amazon Japan, and more. Altogether, these groups account for more than 600,000 Amazonians. We're kindred spirits. Amazon is a company founded by computer scientists and incredible coders. And increasingly, we're propelled forward by pioneering work of AI scientists.
This next clip is where they were showing the photo of Jeff and Jeff as boys at their computers. And I noticed that Jeff Wilke referred to Jeff Bezos as simply the founder, not the founder and CEO. As I think about it, when he lists all of the consumer parts of Amazon that Wilke is head of, AWS, Amazon Web Services, is not part of that, and it doesn't have as many employees for sure, but it's a huge part of Amazon's revenue and income. So there are lots of other key executives, and it's just because this particular executive has line authority over so many of the employees doesn't necessarily mean there's a succession in the works. But the imagery of this presentation did make me think of what might be ahead.
Amazon has been a technology company from the start. It helps that our founder is a computer scientist. I grew up as a programmer, that's me. This is my Timex Sinclair 1000 computer. Anybody in the room have a Timex Sinclair 1000? Yeah! All right, so if you had one, you know my version had 2K of memory. It was not useful for writing machine learning algorithms. By the way, I look at this picture, and I'm guessing that Jeff already was connected to some massive storage in the cloud. And if you had one of these, I had to use the tape recorder, my dad's tape recorder, in order to save data, and it wasn't very much data. The best thing I did with this, in about 1,900 bytes, I wrote a video poker machine after visiting Vegas with my grandparents, and it hadn't helped me at all this week, unfortunately.
I was impressed with Jeff Wilke's speaking style. He had a good presence on stage, and he also did a good job setting the stage for the topics of the Remars conference by going all the way back and telling this engaging story about Amazon's early efforts to have more efficient logistics and what came after that.
When I first showed up at Amazon in 1999, I led our global operations team. I started to ask questions about how we decided where to place inventory and which warehouses, fulfillment centers, to assign orders to. It was especially important to get this right during our holiday season when capacity is so constrained for us. We didn't have much in the way of operations research or formal applied math teams at the time. We were relying primarily on Skip. Let me explain Skip briefly. Skip is not an algorithm. Skip is a dude. Skip Broadhead. Great guy. Skip had a model of the whole operation in his head. And when you had to rebalance the work or solve a problem, you'd walk into his office, you'd explain the situation, and he could intuit exactly where we needed to go. He would figure out what we had to change, what knobs to turn, and he was usually right. But after my first holiday, I was pretty convinced that Skip was not going to scale. So in 2000, we set up an operations research team to begin to work on improving the algorithms that ran our operations.
I'm sure that wasn't the first mention of algorithm at REMARS, because machine learning and artificial intelligence, or AI, were constant themes throughout the whole proceedings, probably mentioned more than any other terms during the session. This was a challenge for me because I will confess to having the vaguest sense of what AI and machine learning are. I did some, Googling on this just to orient myself, and found that machine learning is a subset of AI, and it clearly has to do with math. It has to do with algorithms, and some of these presentations took advantage of the fact that there was a huge screen behind the stage where the speakers would speak. It just was endless over the whole wall, and sometimes there would be formulas that would go from one end of the screen to the other, and there would be flow charts talking about all of the different ways that Amazon is using machine learning to improve efficiency and delivery on behalf of customers. And I was impressed. I mean, I don't think they were just baffling us with BS, and clearly there were, most of the people in the audience, I think, are people that were not as intimidated by these terms or the details of what Amazon's doing as I was. And the purpose of the event is to actually share working knowledge. So the fact that they weren't afraid to use terms which civilians would find very daunting was appropriate to this particular audience. I did run across a resource that I'm going to be using to improve my understanding of this area. At breakfast in the press room on the first day, I met Kathleen Walch and Ron Schmelzer, who work at a company called Cognilytica in Washington, D.C. And this is a company which is focused on AI and machine learning research, does advisory and best practices methodology. They also do a podcast. It's called AI Today, and I have had a chance to listen to it, and they were also broadcasting or recording episodes of their podcast at the expo at REMARS, and I had a chance to sit in on one of their conversations with a really smart guy from the Jet Propulsion lab. Because they are practitioners of AI and machine learning, plus they're really good podcasters, they have a very tight show, well recorded. I think this is going to be a chance to learn more, and I'll have a link to their show in the show notes in case you want to take advantage of what they know. Machine learning, clearly important, clearly embedded throughout Amazon. Some of the early story of how the scientists at Amazon are now deployed everywhere in the company, and so nothing really happens without taking advantage of this very powerful technology that uses data and algorithms and smart connections with the real world on behalf of customers to make things happen, which we talk a lot about here in the show. Whoa, now they can deliver to your garage or your car, or now we're going to have one-day service. These things which in some ways strike us as magical or delightful, when you go back behind the curtain, you see a bunch of guys with very detailed, powerful analytic tools, numbers, algorithms, and the whole bit, making it happen. And that was perhaps one of the strongest impressions I had of being at this event, surrounded by folks that this is just their world, and they're making pretty amazing things happen because of it. The R in Mars was a little easier to get my mind around because there's actual things, robots, that you can see and admire. During one of the keynotes, the head of Boston Dynamics showed off a robot that looked kind of like a dog. It had 4 legs, and it was there on the stage. It actually fell down at one moment, which is kind of dramatic, but it got itself up. And then another one came out into the audience and came very close to us walking down the aisle. Quite an eerie scene. And then videos that this fellow showed were even more impressive. There was a very human-looking robot on 2 feet, weighed 165 pounds, which is what I'm trying to weigh, and it could do backflips and walk on its hands and then end up in a forward somersault. Just really amazing stuff that is actually real, and not all of it is commercial yet, but it's way more sophisticated than I had imagined. In the expo area, I did have a chance to take a look at one robot named Daisy, and then I don't know if you'd call it a robot, but it was a walker that someone would use, who was older, who had some robotic-like characteristics, and the one was that was the one from the Netherlands, and then Daisy was developed at Carnegie Mellon. I did some recordings to give you a feel for what these two robots in the expo were all about.
Hi, my name is Guillaume Sartoretti. I'm a postdoctoral student in Carnegie Mellon's Biorobotics Lab, working with Professor Howie Chozet. But in 1 month, I'll be my own professor in Singapore, National University of Singapore. I'm opening my own lab.
In robotics?
In robotics, yes.
Wow, what kind of resources will you have there?
To be defined. That's the beginning of the job. But yeah, I'm looking at getting one of those most likely and continuing some work that I do with multiple simpler robots.
I see. Well, tell me about what we're looking at here.
So this is Daisy. Mm-hmm. It's a modular hexapod robot. So it's composed of multiple joints that are all similar. Those joints are self-composed modules containing actuation, motor, sensing, here IMU and precise encoders, and a little bit of computation in each joint. One thing that is very, very particular about Daisy is those joints are what's called series elastic, meaning that after the motor at the output of the shaft is an element that allows to measure torque. And this measure of torque can be used to measure balance, but also external forces or perturbances that you can put on the robot. And you can show, you can show it physically, but if you...
I'll move over here with you, okay.
If you push on Daisy,
yeah,
it will naturally cycle through its gates, so it can recover its stance, it can recover its balance. The same way as if
because
I push
it's sensing the torque, because it can feel
exactly.
something's pushing against it.
And it's trying to minimize this external force by taking a step away from the perturbation.
Wow.
It's a really good and robust platform to do locomotion over a variety of terrain, especially rough terrain.
Yeah.
So imagine rock piles, muds, inclines, stairs. The idea is to have a platform that you can build any type of payload on top of it, perception, so cameras, LiDARs. Here we have a manipulating arm that can do pick and place or gathering information, all on top of a platform that can locomote in any very rough terrain. So the idea here is search and rescue first, but also mapping or inspection in dangerous areas or areas where you do not want to deploy humans.
Like a nuclear plant that blew
exactly.
up.
Exactly. One of those.
Now, does this have location capability built in, or would that be something you'd add to the platform?
It is something that we have built in, but it is not built in yet. So there's no, as you can see, there's no cameras on it right now.
Yeah.
But we have a perception payload that we have designed for it with cameras, LiDARs, and this can do, SLAM, so simultaneous localization and mapping. So you localize in the world, and you can do some more high-level deployments where you give it some autonomy or even some intelligence.
So it has 6 legs. 6 legs are better than 4. Why 6 legs?
6 legs is 2 times 3. So it means you can move in what we call alternate tripod, where you always have 3 legs on the ground and 3 legs in the air. With 3 legs on the ground, you have full control over the body. It's always stable in the middle of what we call the support polygon, this triangle connecting all legs that are grounded.
Yeah.
And since you have 3 legs on the ground, you can also fully control the orientation of the body, meaning that you can always stabilize it, in some of the videos that we have.
Yeah.
And you can also control the orientation of a perception system. Imagine a camera tightly attached. You can control where it's looking while still locomoting fully.
And it could be stable while it's actually moving.
Exactly, yes, which is a big advantage if you want to, again, walk over rough terrain.
Now, did you hear the talk this morning about the Kate Darling from MIT and how humans... Do people form emotional attachments to Daisy?
Yes. People love Daisy.
You're in love with Daisy?
I definitely have. I don't know if I'm in love with Daisy. They have strong feelings for Daisy. I'm engaged, so I can't have more than this. But Daisy, she's a crowd pleaser. People love this robot. It's the right factor to not be too impressive, but not too tiny. So it's very cute, and it has this very bio-inspired, human-like locomotion.
Yeah.
And people really like her.
Is that part of the design when you start from the ground up to build something like this? Are you thinking, well, let's add this because it might add to some of that human connection, or does it just happen naturally no matter what you build?
I don't know how much it was intentional, but all of the robots that we've done in the lab, and this is made by a spin-off from the lab, Heavy Robotics, all of those are very well made and are very pleasing to the eye.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it's very much of a conscious effort, but it definitely was part of the design that we do not want to make robots that are scary, that look aggressive.
Or ugly.
So you're not trying to make them cute, you're trying to not make them not cute.
Yeah, not to be
different but
intimidating.
important. Exactly, yes. Yeah.
And is this available for purchase, or it's a commercial product?
Exactly. The full base has 18 joints, and this is commercially available, so as a daisy pack.
And can you say roughly what the price range is? Is it $1 million or $20,000 or what? Where does it fall?
It's closer to 85,000.
85,000. Yeah.
Those actuators are very precise, very robust.
Yeah.
And they are quite pricey.
And this is electric, so you have to plug her in, and you get a couple of hours of action?
Correct. So there's 2 batteries on it that you can charge in about 2 to 3 hours. Mm-hmm. Those batteries will give you about 3 hours of demo time. Mm-hmm. We call demo time something where most of the time it's in stands and sometimes it's moving.
I see.
If you want to do continuous operation, like continuous walking, it would be closer to 45 minutes.
I see. Guillaume, by the way, is from Switzerland, the French-speaking part of Switzerland, but as you can tell, his English is excellent. I wanted to ask him about that robot that I've been playing with. I think I've talked to you about on the show a few times, made by Anki, and unfortunately the company went bankrupt, and I thought he might know the story because it came out of Carnegie Mellon, where he's located, and in fact he did. I think this is an instructive story to include because there was a lot of upbeat talk about robots, but the truth is it's a tough business to actually succeed in, as this particular company found out. Now, I bought a toy that I think came out of Carnegie Mellon, but the company has gone bankrupt. Anki?
Yes.
It's Vector. I love that robot. He'd crawl around my desk and he'd do things. And I thought it was so promising. Are you familiar with that story coming out of Carnegie Mellon?
Yeah.
Just a business plan that didn't quite mesh the way they thought it would?
So I am familiar with this. I don't know how much I can say publicly, but apparently it was a rough year for personal robotics in general, and this was mostly funding that fell through.
Oh, funding that fell through. I
So,
see.
yeah. They got a lot of funding at the beginning, but then it started falling through, and I think they started diversifying their portfolio. So Vector was one thing, but they had a couple of more secret projects in the way that might have used up a lot of their money without really getting to a point where they could get this money back.
I see.
And I think that was the big effect in the bankruptcy, which was a big surprise to all of us, to be honest.
Yeah, it was very sudden.
We have a lot of friends that we know that worked there, and it was a big surprise for them too. It was like a Monday meeting. Hey, you're all fired Wednesday. You'll get 1 week of severance.
Wow. I thought it was an intriguing model because it felt like there was, I forget what the first, Cosmo was the first one, and then Vector. And they were toys. My grandsons loved them. And it felt like they were hoping to sell enough of the toys to make, quote, a real robot.
Exactly. I think that was the idea. I still don't know the details about more of the secret project. I don't know if we'll ever do, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the educational robots were definitely a first phase.
Yeah. If you were really smart about robotics, where would you try to go in the world now?
Carnegie Mellon is part of the big four right now in the U.S. So you'd have Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, and CMU. CMU has been consistently number one in the previous years in AI, in robotics, in computer science. It is a big hub for strong innovation and also specifically applied robotics. We have a lot of robots, and we're among the only ones that have a large portion of the researcher work on robots every day, as opposed to other places which are doing a lot of simulation work but do less deployments. We're really focused on having those robots go from lab to the outside, and for this you need to work specifically on them.
Yeah. I love that it's in Pittsburgh. I mean, a city that was big in steel and fell on hard times, and now it's kind of reinvented as a robot.
Picking back up again, in tech also, Facebook's opening a second headquarter also. Yeah. We have Google. There's a lot of things happening at Uber, etc.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things happening, a lot of them being driven by the success of CMU and University of Pittsburgh also. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff happening from Pittsburgh right now.
That's cool. A few booths down from Daisy was Leah, who is actually a walker, and this is Eric Vlasblom, perception and machine learning engineer at RRC Robotics in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. He begins by telling us how much it costs.
So this one is priced at about 10,000 euros. Mm-hmm. It's mainly because there's a lot of complexity in the system. There's about 72 sensors. But usually it's being bought not by individuals, but by institutions like hospitals or
nursing homes.
Nursing homes,
right.
Yeah. And then they rent it out, so it's more of a leasing model. Yeah.
Well, tell me what it does.
So, well, it's a stroller, and a normal stroller just supports your weight.
Now, you say stroller. Here we would say walker, probably.
Walker.
Is that it's like if you're walking along and you need help? Yeah. Is that what you call a stroller in the Netherlands?
I guess we call it like that.
Stroller is what we put babies in here.
Really?
Yeah. Walker is for older people, like me.
I call it a walker.
Okay, all right. So it's a walker.
It's a walker.
And what's the robotic part of it? What does it do? Because it has that.
So these wheels are motorized.
Yeah.
And these handlebars, they have force sensors inside. Mm-hmm. So they sense what the user is intending to do. Mm-hmm. So Leah will respond accordingly and take you there. So you don't need to exert a whole lot of force to go there. You just have to focus on the walking and supporting your weight. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing it does, but it can also navigate autonomously through your home. So using all of its sensors, it can create a map of the environment, navigate through it, avoid obstacles. So, for example, when you're lying down in bed, you can just press a button. I have a button here.
Oh, you've got a wristwatch. All right.
Press it, and it'll come from the charging station back to you, and you can get up out of bed.
And then can you talk to it and say, Leah, take me to the kitchen?
Well, that's a very good question. Yeah. So this is the first version. We started working on this a little bit before all those Amazon services came out. Then we started collaborating more with them. So in the second version, we'll have these kind of features integrated.
Sure.
Because in fact, we have now a menu on the tablet, and it's quite hard to navigate for old people specifically. Mm-hmm. So indeed, just being able to talk to it is much more intuitive. So that's what we're working on now.
So now it almost looks like is that an iPad that's sitting on it, or
it's not an iPad, but it's a tablet.
Yeah. And so as you face it, you're looking at the tablet, and then you could just tap to, well, it says kitchen. If I tap on kitchen, would it go to the kitchen?
Yeah, so I set the kitchen to be right here.
Okay,
actually.
Good. We're in the kitchen.
We're in the kitchen.
It's a virtual kitchen.
If I walk a little bit with it.
Yeah.
Please try to walk closer.
Oh, see, I need to walk closer. It's
so she's giving you some coaching here.
Yeah, exactly. It's meant to correct your posture. So if you're walking a bit like this, bent forward, then it'll tell you should...
now, is that because there's a camera looking at how your posture is, or the sensors in the handle?
That's very well... Because there's a 3D camera right here.
Oh, I see.
Hidden underneath.
Yeah.
So now, if I press this button, it'll go back to the kitchen.
Oh, I see.
So in this way, you can use Leah to come to you. And you have to go to Leah.
Now, if someone was, my father sometimes has vertigo and he's not too stable, if he started to fall down, would Leah be able to help him not fall?
Yeah, well, you're figuring out all of our features. I can show you right here.
Yeah.
So, Leah, stop going to the kitchen. So, of course, one thing we want is that it moves forward when you intend to move forward.
Yes.
But when you're going too fast, let me demonstrate this for you.
Oh, there's
break.
Which would be what would happen if you were starting to fall down.
Exactly, and that's what you want to prevent as well. And that's being measured by a number of ultrasonic sensors like these.
Yeah.
They measure the distance. And as soon as that increases too much, and if you stop holding these handles.
Oh, okay. So if you take, then it won't just roll away from you.
Yeah, exactly.
What about the red buttons with the exclamation mark? What do they do?
Well, that is for safety. It's an emergency button.
Yeah.
But generally, there's not a whole lot of situations where we have to use it. But,
because it'll stop on its own.
Reasons,
I see.
Needed,
you have to kind of a safety.
It's really safe by itself already.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Anything else about it that we didn't mention?
Well, one thing that I think is pretty cool, especially for elderly people, is we have these workouts.
Oh.
So one thing you can do is dance with it.
Oh, nice.
There's a few dances programmed in here. So there's like the English waltz, the samba,
yeah,
the Viennese waltz.
Let's try. How's your samba? Let's see you do the samba.
My samba is not very well at the moment. But this is to keep people active in a fun and entertaining way.
Right.
Especially elderly people, they really like this to stay active.
That's nice. So you could do a dancing workout. What's a fit test?
A fit test is, for example, when you sit down and you can practice pushing yourself up using these handlebars.
Right.
To improve your strength a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Not surprisingly, there was a lot of discussion of Alexa at REMARS, and I had a chance at the press question and answer period with Dave Limp and Jeff Wilkie to ask Dave a question about the development of Alexa's personality, and we learned something in this answer which I'll be following up on later.
Len Edgerly, Kindle Chronicles podcast. Maybe a question for Dave. In light of Kate Darling's intriguing insights into how humans react to robots, I wonder if thinking about Alexa, if Alexa had a personality when it was first introduced 6 years ago, and over that time, if you've got folks on your team who are consciously creating sort of a personality for this person that we talk to so many times a day, and how would you describe her personality now and what it might be like in the future?
Yeah, sometimes not being first with something is a happy accident. And we weren't the first voice assistant to be out in the world. They were out on phones for much before we did. But the phone voice assistants, they've evolved some, but when they started, they were very utilitarian. They were for dictation, they were for command and control, maybe navigation. And when you're doing command and control, personality actually gets in the way. It would be like you don't want your steering wheel in your car to have a personality. And so, but we were able to step back from that, and we didn't have that legacy. And by not having that legacy from day one, we were able to think about Alexa as an embodiment of a person. And it started with the wake word, the word you say to have her begin to listen to you, which is Alexa. You know, the state of the art, it would have been much easier, trust me, to have it be Hey Amazon or Okay Amazon. That is a much easier wake word model. It has less. It would have had way less error rates to bring it up early on. But we felt like having a name, in this case Alexa, was so much more personality. And so that's the first half. So it's been from day one, it's been a conscious effort. We have, like a lot of things at Amazon, we have an entire dedicated team, single-threaded. They wake up every day and all they think about is Alexa's personality. And they're replicated around the world. So her personality in Germany is different than her personality slightly in Japan. She has some common threads. She's incredibly intelligent. She's incredibly empathetic. But if you were to get answers from her in Japan, it would be slightly different. Another thing we work really hard on is Alexa has opinions. If you've ever gone to a dinner party devoid of opinions, you wanted to run, not walk away from that dinner party. It's a boring dinner party. And so you can ask Alexa what her favorite beer is, and her favorite beer in the U.S. is different than her favorite beer in Germany. It's a global effort with lots of people that work on it all the time.
Alexa was also the topic of a workshop that I took the first full day of the session, and I sat next to a young man named Alex Alpert, who is going to be a senior at the University of Maryland, and was attending the conference as a student, and was able to, I think it cost $600 instead of $2,000 to be there as a student. I thought he was a good example of how the excitement around the technology that's talked about at Mars really has an impact on someone who is young and ambitious and smart like Alex. So we had lunch together after the session, and I asked if he would just tell a little bit about why he was there and give a little more insight into what the world looks like from someone who's probably about 20 years old at this point. He starts by just saying how he ended up at REMARS.
My friend who works at Amazon in the DC area told me about it, and I was just super interested in hearing from professionals in the field about automation, machine learning, getting some hands-on skills, networking.
Now, we were sitting at the same table in the workshop on working with Alexa, and what were you hoping to learn in that session?
So I definitely wanted to learn more about AWS and how to work with the Alexa interface. So yeah, I think I definitely got a little bit of experience, and I definitely know where to start if I was interested in doing a project like this in the future.
What was your impression of the kind of the interface we had to walk through setting up an Alexa account and different? Was that well designed in your view, based on your experience, or what was your sense of how accessible they're making this kind of technology to people of varying skills and backgrounds?
I thought the tutorial was pretty thorough. I definitely think someone with technical experience could go through it easier, but I think they do make it accessible to most people. It might take you a little longer, but I definitely think they provide some of those foundational building blocks.
Yeah. Was this the first time that you'd worked with a Raspberry computer?
Yeah, this is my first Raspberry Pi experience.
The thing is tiny. Is it really a computer?
Oh yeah, I've seen them being used for all kinds of things, and it's pretty powerful. As you could see, it was able to handle all that stuff we were doing. But yeah, it's fascinating how they're just making everything smaller and smaller, and that's essential for the future development of IoT. You know,
Internet of Things. Yeah,
you have to be able to have that high processing on a small piece of hardware.
Yeah. How about the Alexa piece? As you head out when you finish school and you're in work, do you expect voice interface to replace all the other ways that we've talked to computers in the next 10 or 20 years?
I think it really depends on the use. So, yeah, for at-home devices, I think voice will eventually become the primary method of input. But for work, I still think that the traditional keyboard will be used just in terms of ease of use and speed.
Because, yeah, that's right. And precision. I've been amazed to see how challenging it is to have natural speech turned into something that can be used by a computer. Why is that so complicated?
Well, because language in itself is innately complicated. We just take that for granted. You know, we speak on a day-to-day basis. We don't really understand, you know, the natural language, like the way that works. But if you actually, you know, study the linguistics, and if you try to program something like this from scratch, as the presenter showed, there's many different ways to say one command, and your device needs to be able to somehow figure that out.
Yeah. Do you think Amazon is way ahead of Google and everybody else in having devoted so much resources and people to working with natural speech and the Alexa interface?
So I think they have an upper hand because I think Alexa devices are more popular. And because more people have Alexa devices, Amazon has more data to go off of, more data to learn from. So just based on that, I think they definitely have an advantage, for sure.
How concerned are you about Alexa listening to us or being hacked and all of this information, some of it ending up in the cloud after the wake word? But what's your level of paranoia on a 1 to 10 scale on misuse of this kind of technology?
Yeah, I would say a 7, especially in the wake of, you know, these recent news articles showing that Amazon, you know, pays people to listen to, you know, what you say to Alexa. And, you know, on the one hand, you see that's necessary for the development of the technology, but on the other hand, you know, you have this device in your home, and it's kind of, you know, it feels like a violation of privacy. So it's definitely that struggle between functionality and security that we as a society are going to have to ask ourselves, you know, what's more important? Where do we have to make these kinds of sacrifices for the advancement of technology?
It also seems, too, that, you know, people are concerned about this, but if you give them a choice to say, well, how much privacy do you want? Which of these settings on Facebook do you want to tweak? My feeling is, and I have a feeling a lot of people who are just general users say, you know, I don't have time to worry about all of these settings. I maybe want somebody else to make those decisions for me. And if that's the case, I wonder how you keep the vigilance on the privacy side to be as important as it should be.
It can definitely be overwhelming. That's why I think companies can do a better job at making it more accessible to the user, to specify, their security preferences on, these popular social media sites or any other service we use.
How vigilant are you, like, say, do you have pretty simple passwords? Do you have a different password at every website do you go to? Or
So, I really try to diversify my passwords, and Google Chrome has this new feature where it suggests a very strong password that it randomly generates, which is interesting because then you never memorize it because it's saved. So that adds the additional concern of, well, if someone just gets on your computer, then they can log on to anything because the password is saved. So that could actually defeat the purpose of having a strong password.
That's like those 1Password programs that do that. And
I mean, there's many different precautions different companies take, like, forcing you to change your password every 180 days.
Yeah.
That's a common practice I've seen. I think all those practices help. Yeah. But we're asking people, humans cannot, remember several, like a new, unique, complex password for each service they use. That's just not.
Yeah.
You can't expect that. So as a company, you have to take that into account. You know how much effort the day-to-day user is going to put in.
Yeah. Now, you're interning for a government contractor. What kind of an opportunity is that for you as you go into your senior year?
So I think that experience will give me a different viewpoint, working for a company in the private sector and working for a government contractor is very different, not only in terms of the work itself, but in terms of company culture, benefits, things like that. So I'm super excited to see what it's like.
And will that start after this conference?
Yes, next week.
And then go for the summer, and then you'll be back to school?
Back at school.
Yeah.
Very excited.
Well, I appreciated your help. There was I think maybe for the first 40 minutes, I had the illusion that I might be able to keep up with everybody doing this. And you gave me some kind advice along the way. I appreciated it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's always fun working with other people, helping each other, because in a career, you're going to be on a team. So you have to be able to collaborate, help each other, and... Yeah.
That's right, and I found a little typo you'd made in a URL that saved your bacon there.
Oh yeah. So everyone has something to help the other person with, for sure.
Well, I'm sure you can imagine there are plenty of other things that I could have passed along to you, and I didn't quite get to the end of my list, but I've got to check out of my room at the Atria at 5, which is about an hour and 20 minutes away. I extended it so that I could finish up and still fly to Denver. I'll conclude with summarizing my sense of the future as it appeared to me here at REMARS. One topic which came up a couple of times was the potential of antitrust action against Amazon. Jeff Wilke, I heard, answer the same question the same way a couple of times. He framed it by saying big companies like Amazon deserve scrutiny, and we welcome that. Our goal is to withstand any scrutiny that we get. I'm sure that's not the last time that topic is going to come up. And I think one impression I have from this conference is that any idea of breaking up Amazon because it's too big really does violence to the sense of how the different parts of Amazon are helping not only the company itself, but making technology available to others. There's a robo-maker capability which enables small startups to simulate the results and the success of their robots at vastly cheaper costs than they might do anywhere else. And, of course, AWS has made all kinds of businesses possible. So Also, talking to some people from overseas, I met a guy from Israel, another guy from Belgium, and the idea that the U.S. would break up one of its successful companies compared with, say China, the chances that China would break up Alibaba for some sort of theoretical antitrust concept that a Yale student had thought up and was being bandied about by political candidates. People just, shaking their head, as am I. But it's, Amazon's smart to say, yes, scrutiny is appropriate, and I would agree with that, and I would expect them to work pretty hard at making sure that the things that are flowing from the size of Amazon benefit not only us as customers, but hopefully society as well. I feel pretty optimistic about the future after spending this time at Remars. Obviously, everybody there knew there were issues about privacy and different things which did come up. It wasn't a total rah-rah session for the future, but I'll say that it left me very optimistic about Amazon's prospects. And I had a moment where I was sitting. They had a replica of the Blue Origin space capsule there just in front of the registration area. So you could go in there and you could sit in one of the 6 seats. They were totally reclining. So I guess when you take that ride in the rocket, you're reclining and you have great big windows. You can look out, and then once the weightlessness kicks in, you can float around the capsule for a few moments. I'll have to confess that it made me dream of one day having a chance to ride in that vehicle, and why not? Imagine that Jeff Bezos is there. I asked Alexa for some help to figure out if I'm shooting at TKC 1000, the 1000th weekly episode of this show, Jeff will be 63 years old. I'll be 77. And that would occur in October of 2027. By then, maybe it'll be kind of a routine trip, probably still an expensive trip to head up there. And it'd be a short interview, but it would be a pretty wonderful time to be floating around in space asking Jeff a few questions. By then, I'm sure he will have turned over the reins of Amazon to someone else so that he can devote full time to his really more and more compelling vision of space as the way to save the Earth, which is really how he frames it. I got to drive ride in a pace car at the Las Vegas Speedway last night. They had a big party out there, and I was going 125 miles an hour in some kind of souped-up car angling around the turns. It was pretty terrifying. And there was also a huge fight of robots, fight to the death of these robots, and it was kind of an elimination series. I've never seen anything like that myself either. So lots to savor, and I'll be looking forward to following up on some ideas for interviews. I've hoped to find that group that is in charge of Alexa's personality to see if we can get an interview with them. I wouldn't be surprised if they're based in Cambridge. And I made a number of different connections with people here that I'll be following up for interviews in the coming weeks and months. Time to pack up, time to get this up on the internet and head to the airport. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear any impressions you have of what I talked about or what you might have read about Remars and how optimistic you are about the future. You can send me email at podchronicles@gmail.com. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from Las Vegas. Bye.